Welcome to the Best Music Podcast. My name is Dan the Music Man, and this week's featured guest is Alex Parchment. Alex has had the opportunity to perform at the Kennedy Center, Jazz at Lincoln Center, and Blues Alley with jazz luminaries Patti Austin, Christian McBride, David Sanborn, Chick Corea, and Marion Meadows. In 2015, he was selected for the world-renowned Betty Carter Jazz Ahead program at the Kennedy Center. He now performs as a solo artist while also leading the Alex Parchment Quintet, a traditional jazz ensemble, and AP.Chemistry, a musical experiment fusing soul, funk, hip-hop, R&B, and jazz to form a unique and energetic sound. In April 2020, Alex released his debut album entitled Burnin Up, which yielded 2 placements on the Smooth Jazz Billboard's Top 30 chart, Vibin In Time at number 1 and It's Real at number 11. And his new single, When It's Hot, is out now on all major streaming platforms. You can find him on social media everywhere at Mr. Parchment. That's at MrParchment, Mr. Parchment. Alex, thanks so much for taking the time to come on.
Oh, man. Thank you so much for having me. It's a great introduction.
So let's start with a couple warm-up questions just to get us started. So for those who do not know you yet, what is your primary instrument?
Okay. My primary instrument is trumpet. I play trumpet and flugelhorn.
Fantastic. And over the past couple days, with all the music that you've listened to, what's been a song that stood out to you?
The past few days, I would say, I recently, I would say an album. Ironically, I just did a recording session with this popular artist, Rosalia. And so I took some time to listen to her first album, and I really loved it. And so I would recommend checking that out.
Fantastic. Could you give the name for us one more time, please, Alex?
Rosalia.
Rosalia. Fantastic.
Yes.
We'll check it out. So before we get into talking about your projects, I want to make sure that everyone understands what we mean by Billboard charts and what it means to chart and the significance of that for you as an artist, but also the significance of this on a business level. So whenever in our conversation you and I say charted, hit the charts, or placed, we're referring to the Billboard charts that track music sales. So Billboard is a company that tracks song sales via several different instruments such as Nielsen SoundScan and Nielsen BDS, as well as social engagement metrics. Artists or labels will submit a title of their song through Nielsen and get an ISRC, an International Sound Recording Code, and a recording code, and a UPC, Universal Product Code, or EAN, European Article Number for our friends in Europe. And this is how the song is tracked for sales. Radio play is tracked by Nielsen BDS. On Billboard, the charts themselves may be for a specific genre, such as R&B country or smooth jazz, or it might be a conglomeration of sales over all genres. The charts can be ranked according to sales, streams, social interaction, or airplay. That would be songs on the radio, either terrestrial radio or FM radio or internet radio. And the main song charts, such as the Hot 100, all 3 types of data are used to compile the charts. So as we mentioned at the beginning, Alex has had 2 songs off of his first album make it onto these charts. And one of them go number 1, which is not a trivial thing. It's very cool to have a number 1 charting song on your first album. So the album was Burnin Up, and the Billboard number 1 song was Vibin In Time, and we got a Billboard number 11 for It's Real off of Burnin Up. So Alex, quick question for you before we jump into talking about this just a little bit more in depth. I noticed that you have both It's Real and Vibin In Time released as singles, as well as released on the album. Now, did the singles chart or did the songs off the album chart?
The singles charted.
Fantastic. And did you release those singles before the release of the album on April 24th?
I released Yes, I released both of them. I've released, I think it's real all the way in August of, um, well, in the summer, I believe it was August. My album didn't come out until May. I mean, sorry, in April of
Yeah.
2020. So it's definitely had some time before the album came out.
So you released the two singles the summer before. So the summer of 2019 is when you released the singles.
Well, so it's real came out in 29 summer of 2019,
Got it.
and we let it play out with the radio until they
Right.
eventually took it out of the rotation,
Yes.
and then we released "Vibin In Time" around the same exact time as the album came out.
Cool. Very cool. So to understand the process of getting onto the charts, it took you approximately 4 months from the release on April 24th to August 1st to get number one on the radio play on Billboard for Vibin In Time. So, what was that journey like for those 4 months? Were you like checking it every week? Were you getting emails from the label? Were you excited? Did you know that you had the publicity and the organic support that was going to push it up?
I, bel- I got a lot of sorry, talked to a lot with the radio. I mean, sorry, with the label. They talked to me about every week just to see how we were doing, and always gave me like a listing of the charts and
Yeah.
all the radio stations that played us and added us just to see how we were doing. With It's Real, we did so well, number 11 for it being my first single, first time ever coming out, and nobody really knowing who I was.
Wow.
So to go to number 11, not even have the satellite radio ad, we didn't even have that ad for that song. And we still got to go all the way up to number 11. It was a huge feat. And so once I knew that we got the radio ad and we got all of the main reporting stations for Vibin In Time, we said this can really do something. Now, we weren't expecting number one because this is my first album, second single, but it was so crazy because over the time we were slowly growing, growing. Then we got to like 14, um, and we stayed there for a bit, and then we had a crazy jump from 14 to 7, and that was ridiculous. And then the next week we had our jump from 7 to 1, and so we did two 7 steps jumps. It was ridiculous, and it was just totally unexpected. I remember I got the call, and I was blown out of my mind because I thought, hey, we've been on this chase for so long, but seeing that it happened, it was just a remarkable feeling. It's still a crazy feeling, even as I am working on the publicity for my next song now. I still definitely feel the effects of that first campaign.
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting for listeners to understand that the way you're seeing your song climb up the charts is because cumulatively, every week, more and more radio stations are playing the song. And then they are possibly the radio stations that are already playing it because of its popularity. They're playing it more times, they're putting it in rotation more frequently. And so, due to that sort of organic expansion, I guess you'll tell us in terms of the audience reception of it. What happens is every week, the number of times the song is played is measured through Nielsen by Billboard, and that's how the charts are determined. So when your song hit number one, you were getting 210 plays a week, which
Right.
which if you think about how many jazz stations there are in the US, that's pretty cool because it's not like there's 210 stations, each one of them playing your song one time. There's a couple of stations out there, especially because you have like WBGO out of Newark, syndicated across a very large geographical area.
Right.
There's not as many jazz stations as you might think. There's few, and then they get spread out, and sort of the programs get broadcast out through other networks. So it's really incredible that for a second single, you had this much radio play, which I think goes to not just a promotion campaign for radio play, but really goes to people's organic reaction to your music. and saying, yeah, we'd like to hear this again. So can you talk a little bit about the fan reaction that you saw happen from April 24th to August 1st, that time that your song climbed up the charts?
Right. We knew right away that this song just had a whole different level. Just even in the process of creating it and putting it out, we had the album already recorded and done and ready to go, and then added Vibin In Time after we had everything ready because we had this idea and the song just really was so strong and stuck out, and we had to just add it to the album. So we knew from its inception that we can really do something with this. When we first released the single, it's when I really started getting a lot of friend requests on Facebook.
Wow.
It's so unfortunate though that since we've been locked down and such, I haven't been able to work outside and talk to people and perform more and really hear how it's connecting with audiences and such.
Mm,
But just from looking at social media and just from people who've been reaching out to me, it's been such a warm reception. And people really are starting to understand the concept of what we've been going for and trying to, have a progressive approach to the smooth jazz music and make something that can really connect, can really make people want to move. Um, Paying attention to every single part of the sound in a song, not just the trumpet, but make sure every element
mm,
of the recording is just contributing to the idea of we want to connect with people and being very intentional. And I feel it's definitely been coming across. And so it's been the standard, when we're going into creating something, when we're going in to release something, we always have that in mind. And I'm just grateful to be working with a team of people that really understand that. And we can reach audiences. And I can't wait to see, hopefully, this time next year, when we can finally perform at places, how people, how these songs can hit them with my own eyes. And like you
mm.
said, that organic component is so important because that's what we do this for. I going into creating this album, I had no idea really about Billboard or about even going to radio or anything of that nature. My goal was just to make something that people can love and hopefully take something with and enjoy. It's always been my goal with music. I want to make somebody happy. I want to give them something that they didn't have before they heard me. And so it's funny not thinking about those aspects of the industry aspects, the Billboard and such. I feel like kind of solidified the process of us going to Billboard and us having the success that we have because we're doing it in a sense that's a bit genuine. And
Yeah,
I hope that the audience can relate to that.
you weren't trying to manufacture a number one Billboard charting song. You were trying to manufacture a song that artistically was going to fulfill your goal of connecting to
Yes,
people and creating an uplifting experience to make someone's
absolutely.
life better after having listened to your music. And I
Absolutely.
think what's really interesting, you mentioned this team of people, and your case is very interesting because it makes the argument for partnering with a record label, which is very rarely made these days. And the record label that you're on, Next Paradigm, seems to be very good at picking artists with a look and a sound and then getting them on Billboard. I managed to check out the label, and it seems like a lot of your fellow label artists have at some point in time also placed on Billboard. So I think, like you said, that teamwork, you're
Mhm.
focused on creating the art and really making the art for art's sake and for the connection, but then having that team that understands the business side of things that then gets you that exposure, that then gets you that success, that maybe has the in to certain radio stations, that gets the ball rolling. It's really fascinating to see that in 2021, and I never thought I'd say this, you're actually better off for working with a label. And so I think this is a very, very interesting case study to say, yeah,
Absolutely.
listen, as much as people tout, self release, independent, this, that, and the other, you can still get a very, very good result, better than you might have gotten on your own, arguably, from a business end, by teaming up with the folks over at Next Paradigm. So, can you talk a little bit about the experience, the teamwork that goes into that?
Oh, absolutely. And I must also say, make sure that it's the right label. I think what goes into making Next Paradigm so successful is that it's led by musicians. It's
Mm,
led by people who have done this already and know what the artist needs is the artist first. And so when we are coming together, the integrity of the art that we're creating and the integrity of making sure that the artist is, taken care of and everything is transparent, everything is just as cohesive and no strings attached, no anything happen behind your back, you know, is there. So it makes it so much easier to approach creating art when you have those facilities behind you. So that is a big proponent. I definitely recommend making sure if you're going to go around a label, make sure you look into how they treat their artists. That's very important. Not just maybe their top artists, but all of them,
mm.
because that's a huge thing. But working with them was so great because this first album, I had a concept absolutely of what I wanted to create, but stepping into this genre of contemporary jazz for the first time when my whole upbringing and everything I've done so far studied was this traditional jazz, studied classical in college. And so having being able to approach this genre, being able to keep the integrity of the music that I'm performing to make sure that it's contextually accurate and making sure that I'm doing it a service and adding to it and not taking away from it, was definitely some things that, we had to really break down. And so had to do some research, listening to Grover Washington, listening to a bunch of people who have done this before me, and how can I, really mesh with that sound and that concept behind it in order to grow. Because one, you don't want to reinvent the wheel, but at the same time, you want to make sure that you're honoring what came before you. And so doing that research was great. Going into recording the session, we had you know, a bunch of great people here. We even had more experience in this genre trumpet player in the sessions talking to me about some of the decisions I was making to making sure that we were being contextually accurate and making sure that we can really deliver on what parts of our process are the parts that are you know right for this genre. And so having that asset was a big tool for this first album.
That's huge. So you actually had a trumpet player who'd played on smooth jazz records before and sort of knew what the goal was in terms of note choices, mic placement, all this kind of stuff, come in and talk to you about it?
Yeah, this yes, more like just making sure that the direction was there, making
Hmm.
sure we could talk about the kind of sound you want to achieve,
Mm.
and just it was more as in it making sure that the thought process and the mindset was there of
Wow.
how can
Cool.
we approach this correctly. And I saw that definitely helped. And it was just a session where we probably did about um half the album in a session over a week, and that really opened my eyes. And so when I was able to finish the rest of the album on my own, when I went back home, that really just, I kept all that mindset together and, really got to dive in and use the tools that I've amassed to continue to grow.
So, what was your inspiration for making this album?
Hmm. Inspiration was, well, one, I wanted to branch out and try something that um, we'll try something new, but in a market and in a place where, we've all heard music from before. And it's unfortunately, when you hear about smooth jazz, especially the people in the traditional jazz market and such, they always are talking bad about it and, say that it has, whatever they say, it's all there. And my approach was I wanted to create something that could connect to people that was genuine and really in context with the music, but something that was substantial, something that could be played to anybody and they would respect it and take something from it. And so how can we play in this market, in this genre, and with all these listeners, who the listeners are people that also listen to a lot of gospel music, also listen to a lot of older R&B music, also listen to, you know, just a bunch of different genres that smooth jazz is influenced by. How can I take my influences and my process, apply it to this music, and connect with that audience? And this is just the start of it. So, Burning Up, I wanted to come in kind of hot and really just enter the conversation. And I believe that we definitely achieved that.
For sure. And to clarify for our listeners at home who may not understand the sort of attitude that gets thrown around quite frequently among, we could call them traditional jazz players about smooth jazz, is generally in smooth jazz, there's going to be less complexities in the harmony. So if we were to play a solo over it from a certain perspective, from just a changes perspective, it would not be as hard. But I think we can very easily make the argument, which is what you were saying, which is, well, okay, maybe we're not doing giant steps, but how can you make these changes sing? How can you make these changes worthwhile? How can you put the art into these changes? And I think the sort of clap back is, well, if you're an artist, you can make it work and you can make art out of whatever genre you put yourself into, and genre becomes inconsequential because it's only a tapestry and a wrapping paper for the actual art itself. If you're going to touch someone, if you're going to improve someone's life, you're going to touch someone, you're going to improve someone's life. And I think the second part of the clapback is, well, how many people are reached by a smooth jazz album versus a standard jazz album? And again, I have standard people on this podcast all the time, and I'm sure they're going to come back at me with a whole bunch of stuff about what I just said. And I cannot wait for those conversations. But just to explain for listeners to understand that there's a certain level of technical ability and understanding of harmony that goes into playing, for example, giant steps. That would not be a prerequisite for the particular notes that are generally used in smooth jazz. And for that reason, some standard, we could call them classical jazz players, take issue with smooth jazz. Do you think that's a fair summary?
Very. I thought you said it very poetically, actually. And I appreciate um, your the way you said that. It was really nice. But it's so funny. Like I said before, my upbringing has been in traditional jazz,
Yeah.
learning giant steps. My favorite trumpet players, Roy Hargrove, Miles Davis, and Freddie Hubbard. And so spending time transcribing those musicians and spending time, really spending hours and hours and learning and studying. I still listen to traditional jazz probably more than any other type of music.
Mm.
And so, and I definitely plan in the next year or so to have other projects, EPs where I'm doing on my own, where I am doing things more in the tradition. But I think which is great is that I'm taking a lot of what I've learned from studying traditional jazz and studying more complex harmony and studying, the different styles and techniques of different prolific trumpet players, is that I can take it to this lens and say that's great, but how can I also make this for somebody who primarily listens to music with singers? because that's the main audience in smooth jazz is they're coming from a space where they really listen to mostly artists' music with singers in it. And how can I relate to that? So my biggest goal is to make my trumpet as close to having a vocal quality as possible. You know, my biggest thing is studying singers, studying Nancy Wilson, studying how would Prince rip, how would Michael Jackson play this, how would Luther Vandross, or how would somebody along those lines really approach this, and studying Nat King Cole and such, and really just getting the approach of a singer. How can I make these melodies sound like I'm singing words? And so I feel that's a big component because then it takes away oh, I'm a trumpet player, oh, I'm a guitar player, I'm a saxophone player, and you're more of a musician because you're just connecting with the people more. And it's all about the music. And you have to remember, all these instruments were made to emulate the voice in the first place. From the beginning, the first instrument has always been the voice. And so when you take a step back from what you're doing technically on your instrument to make it happen to what sound are you creating, you really can uh, tap into a whole nother level of connectivity with an audience that you're going for. And then you're right. It doesn't matter what genre you're playing because it's not about the genre, it's about the musical tapestry that you're creating. Because if anybody can sing to it, then it's everybody's music.
So can you talk a little bit about the importance of melody in your songs, because that's something that is always so strong, even on your EPs, all the singles you do throughout the entire album.
Mhm.
This is sort of feeding off of what you were just talking about, emulating the voice, looking at Luther, looking at Prince, looking at Michael, looking at Marvin, and really understanding the way in which a singer would approach. But can you talk a little bit about the process of how you go about writing these really, I don't like to use the P word, but they're perfect melodies, that they're so encapsulating a feeling and a story, and on top of that, musically and melodically, everything's fitting in place. So what's your process like to develop a melody for a song? Is this what comes first? Are you singing it? Do you put it in a tape recorder? Do you play it? What's the process?
Oh yeah. So singing always comes first for me. All the times I'm either I was a lot of times I'll come up with the idea, the concept. Back when I used to drive a lot more, back when that was back before the pandemic. I used to drive to and from Baltimore to DC to go teach lessons. Um, I used to have a lot of time in my car just turn off the sound and just sing and just come up with ideas and such. And that was really my car was the incubator for those ideas.
So you're saying you're turning it up and singing. What are you turning up and
Oh,
what are you singing over?
I'm turning down any music or anything I'm listening to. So it's just me and the engine and the tires, and I'm just singing to myself and just humming ideas and thinking of things. And I swear, a lot of my ideas have just come from just sitting in the car driving.
Hmm.
Now, also it comes from just me sitting at my keyboard, playing chords, and just singing. Singing is just the most important thing because for me, your voice is connected to your soul. And so anything that you can sing, you already know is tapped into your soul. And so if I'm trying to create a melody, I'm just thinking about how would this sound with words? How would this relate to somebody who mostly listens to songs with words in it? And that's really just a big step. So a lot of times music just starts from just the idea of the bass line, the- a general idea of the chords, and an idea of the melody, and that really kind of brings it all together. I'm always when I'm listening to music, I always hear, ironically, like a bass first.
The
And,
foundation.
yeah, foundation.
Which in and of itself, depending on the way you approach it, can be a melody.
Yes, and I intentionally try to always make my bass melodic.
Mm.
Absolutely. Because that's definitely important. That serves as a counter melody for what you're doing, and it can really give the song the energy that you need.
Indeed. And I want to go back to something you said, which is that the voice comes from the soul. So when you're making your melodies, it's coming from a truly authentic place. And I think what's interesting to note is also the physical side of that, which is the phenomena of audiation, which is basically just the fancy music way of saying hearing something in your head. So if you've ever had a song stuck in your head and you can hear the song playing even though there's no music, you're audiating.
Right.
So the what you do when you sing is you're limiting yourself only to what you can audiate. So you're
Hmm.
limiting yourself to only a true musical expression of things that you understand on an intimate musical level. Because if you were, and this is again for the listeners, I understand you get this, but if you were playing on a trumpet, you could employ a technique that you understood intellectually how to execute, and that would create a sound or a series of sounds that you could not previously imagine or have a clear vision of. Whereas when you are singing, you're limited by the relationship that you have with your voice, and you're limited by your understanding and the work that you've done with ear training, harmony, and melody to be able to bring all those elements together and then create a pure musical expression. So it's almost like a meeting of mind, soul, and knowledge. And all that comes together to create the melody.
Absolutely. Yes, that's exactly what it is. And well, you said it so well. And I feel definitely that's what fuels the creation. If you listen to my EP Pent Up Emotions, I feel like that's a clear example of that because I took a minimalistic approach to the production and took a honest approach to just the chords and just really wanted to focus on making melodies that you can hear somebody singing right now on the radio. And so I feel as if it's just a huge proponent of my approach to music is making sure that the voice leads. Because if I can sing it and I play it, that'll make you want to sing it. You can too. And that's a way that we can further connect. And then you can take this with you. Hopefully, it'll get, you can audiate it yourself and it'll be stuck in your head. That's the goal. You want to make sure that this is just all relatable. And these are the tools to make it happen.
Mm, absolutely. I've got one more question for you about Burning Up before we get up to Pent Up Emotions.
Sure.
So, your use of synthesizers on this album I find to be fascinating. So, can you talk about the use of synthesizers specifically on the songs Tonight and The Vibe? Because there's a little bit of like a Game Boy FM vibe going on there with the synths. They're way in the back, so you have to listen very carefully to hear them. But
Mhm.
there's some really interesting flavors going on there. Can you talk about the artistic decisions that led to that happening?
Sorry, can you say what two songs again?
Tonight and The Vibe. Tonight
All
had the
right.
most
Yes,
synths, and The
absolutely.
Vibe was sort of like a callback with some more sort
Yeah.
of FM style synths.
Yes. Well, if you listen to the songs, you got to remember the if you hear the um where we're going from, what is the approach of that? And we're thinking about dance music. We're thinking
Ah,
about,
okay.
and so if you want to be authentic to what's popular in a lot of dance music, especially in Europe, a lot of synthesizers.
Mm.
And so it's all there to support the melody and support the groove, but just give it, the contextual accuracy to be able to say, yes, this is what this is, and it's recognizable by the audience, it's familiar to them, so it's very approachable.
So the
Um,
use of synthesizers was part of the genre palette that you were using to present the songs in a more modern context. Like you said before, you didn't want to go back and redo what someone's done before. You also didn't want to reinvent the wheel. You
Hmm.
wanted to draw from your musical predecessors, but also contribute something new. So this was part of keeping in that palette.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we definitely have songs where we've drawn more than less. If you listen to Togetherness on the album, that is I wrote that to honor Grover Washington, and Bill Withers, rest in peace to Bill Withers, of course, who recently passed. Um, Same chord progression as Just the Two of Us, and so I wanted to make sure I used my influence from these artists and from these people who have done this and are really built in the tradition to say thank you, but also move forward and say it in my own way. So that's very important. And then when you listen to, speaking of synthesizers, the title track, Burning Up, I have, during my solo section, I put my trumpet through an effect itself, like a little auto wah and chorus and such combined together to create this really unique kind of sound for the trumpet because a lot of trumpet players, especially when they dive into playing music that's a little more fusion based, you listen to Donald Byrd, you listen to Roy Hargrove, and a bunch of other people, Miles Davis,
Bitches
they
brew.
have some type of effect on their trumpet.
Mm.
And so since Burning Up, I felt like out of all the songs, the album was one that kind of really had a mesh of a bunch of different elements. You heard a lot of hip hop, you heard some funk, you heard the jazz influence in the chords in the B section and such, but using that influence and using that idea really kind of put it all together for me.
And to give our listeners an understanding of what you're talking about, an auto wah is going to be an effect that's going to automatically, over a set period of time, uh, cut out and then add back in the high frequencies of your sound. So essentially, wow, 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 wow. It's going to take that sort of an effect and put that over your trumpet without you having to physically manipulate a wah pedal. So it's an automatic wah. And then you also used a chorus, which is an effect that is going to duplicate your sound and have it play again at a specified duration of time after your initial attack. So let's say you play then you get an either like zero point zero 0.01 seconds later, and then you can slightly detune it to make it more flat or more sharp, and then you do several versions of that, and then that combined effect of all those replications of your sound create a chorus sound where it sounds like more than one of you would be playing, hence the name chorus.
Yes.
Cool. So, and then also I did want to mention that the album that I cited that I was thinking of for Miles for effects would be Bitches Brew because
Yes.
I'm hearing that title track and had like distortion on there, maybe
Oh,
a wah pedal, all kinds of crazy stuff going on that trumpet sound.
oh yeah,
Listeners,
absolutely.
after you're done listening to Alex Parchment's discography, you should go check out Miles Davis, Bitches Brew.
Right.
So,
Definitely.
EP, Pent Up Emotions. Something that really struck me about this EP was the rhythm, because the rhythm of the trumpet specifically, it was super laid back and a lot of times really pushing the boundaries of what we might think as sort of being late on the beat, and really just pulling the whole thing, just sort of like cold molasses, like going through
Okay.
it. And it was a really cool experience. I actually had to sort of go through it twice because the first time I was listening to it, I would hear 30 seconds of the first track and I would go, okay, this is cool. Like, what is he going to do next? And I was so excited to see what was going to happen in the next chapter that I actually would fast forward to the next song, listen to 30 seconds, fast forward to the next song, listen to 30 seconds. Because I was just so intrigued by your rhythmic exploration of presenting the melody in a way that is not typical. So, can you talk a little bit about what your emotional or artistic state was that brought about this very sort of cool, laid back, but sometimes even pulling back rhythmic feeling?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for that. I appreciate it. I well, yeah, the concept of this album came from, it was only the EP was recorded in the span of a weekend, right before my birthday. Um, and I'm started the keyboard with this one. And I wanted to just, it would be in the middle of the night. I would have all the lights off except for these colored lights I have behind me. And I was just a vibe. And so I wanted to just create songs that just sounded like being in the room I was in.
Mm.
And but also connect to an audience that, list that a little audience that is like, our generation, where they're listening to a lot of the modern R&B music and such,
And
but at the
hip hop.
same time, sorry.
And hip hop too, like with
Yes,
like the
absolutely.
drums and
Yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
yes. And also, but pulling from a lot of my influences, mainly D'Angelo and Questlove and that whole project of Voodoo, who just celebrated 21 years, I believe, yesterday or 2 years ago, of being out. Um, their approach to time and how, yes, it's there, but it's there as maybe a sense of a glue to keep everything together,
Mm.
but using the concepts of making sure that, you know, it's almost like it's a suggestion of where the pulse is. You hear it in other instruments, of course, and I made sure to make sure that there were a lot of elements that kept the time very strong. But when it came to the melody, when I'm trying to convey this message of love and this message of expression, like I'm doing in Pent Up Emotions, I really wanted to just focus on everything going into that sonic painting. And so taking a step to really just let the song breathe, led me to playing a little bit more behind than not. So I felt everything, even especially the space, was very important. I felt the space was almost more important than the actual notes I was playing in this particular project. And so I wanted to honor that. And I felt playing it in the way that I did, recording it very close to the microphone, um, using a very breathy approach to my trumpet playing and making sure that it was almost like a sweet whisper, kind of led to that whole entire approach.
So if we look at this like we're in music history class and we're talking about this song, 100 years from now, what we would say is Alex was staying up late. He was recording these songs at night. So it was almost like this night sleepy end of the day feeling, plus looking at D'Angelo and Questlove. Plus, it was like this whispering quality um, that resulted in this very interesting exploration of rhythm and rhythmic placement. And I think another interesting point is going back to what you were talking about before about trying to make the trumpet sound like a singer. I can't name a song, but I'm thinking of definitely some Erica Badu songs where she does a similar thing with the time and really pulls back on it. And again, I can't cite a song, but I know I've heard some. And so I think it's very interesting to notice that your your sort of stated idea of creating a vocal quality with the trumpet, you're actually following through on that here as well because you're emulating what a vocalist would do. A lot of times for listeners, you'll have instruments such as drums, bass, keyboard, guitar, synths, holding the pulse, holding the time, all being very precise, even mathematically precise, like with a computer.
Right.
And then a vocalist can kind of float in and out of being directly connected with that and then pulling on the strings, pulling back or pushing forward on that. And so what Alex has done here is he's explored the possibility of doing that, but with a trumpet.
Absolutely. Yes. And if you a great example of Erica Badu's song is Didn't You Know? You could really hear that If you listen to that next to some of my album, Pent Up Emotion, you can really hear some of that influence. It's a strong one. But absolutely, you think all the way back to Nat King Cole when he would have these beautiful, beautiful arrangements and he would just float over it. And then you could listen to Anita Baker, and
Mm.
you would have some of the same elements. And then you can go into modern day, well, of course, with Erica Badu, and then even modern day today, you listen to artists like Drake when he's singing, or you listen to SZA, you listen to certain people, Summer Walker. They really have kind of that same kind of approach of just floating. And so I wanted to make sure I had that floating quality.
And I think it's important for listeners to understand that, as a trained musician myself, my sort of knee jerk reaction when you said Drake was to be like, yeah, well, maybe he's not aware of what he's doing. It's not an artistic choice. It's a product of not understanding pulse and beat and rhythm. But I think if you look at his body of work, he does understand
Mhm.
pulse and beat and rhythm. Like if you look at him when he's in the groove, he's in the groove and it's on
Right.
fire. So it's very interesting to understand that for some of these artists that musicians might sort of, just like with the classically trained jazz musicians sort of brushing off smooth jazz, trained musicians might want to brush off the artistic choices at first glance of some of
Mhm.
these modern artists. And I think it's really important to sort of slow down, forget everything you learned in school, and just look at what's being presented to you, not at the artist, not with all these preconceived cultural notions that we have generated through the music school and the music education system around, these hierarchies of certain art being important and certain art not being important. And, oh, we're going to listen to J.S. Bach and C.P.E. Bach, but we're not going to talk about any of the black composers, for example, not to get started on race. But you understand what I'm saying in terms of there's this culture, there's an embedded culture where we perceive the artistic choices of certain people and certain artists from certain time periods as being immediately viable and worth having a conversation about. And then the artistic choices of more modern artists maybe just don't even get consideration. So that was just a very interesting thing to bring our listeners through to understand that Drake is making a very interesting artistic choice. SZA is making a very interesting artistic choice that we can talk about with the same sense of analysis and the same depth and the same wonder and the same appreciation as we talk about a Beethoven sonata.
Absolutely.
Mm. Cool. So let's talk about your new single, When It's Hot.
Yes.
It sounds great. Again, strong melody, beautiful production. Everything is exactly where it needs to be. Everything we've talked about so far in this conversation about having a song that needs to fit the genre package, the genre idea, it's absolutely there. Before we started the podcast, we were chatting a little bit. You said it's starting to pick up some airplay. So, what's going on with When It's Hot? What can you tell us?
Oh, when it's hot, it's great. We've been picked up by a bunch of radio stations and already satellite radio on watercolors. And it came out on the 18th. Well, we went to radio officially on the 18th. And so seeing that, we're getting this momentum so fast compared to the other two singles I've done in the past off of my first album, you know, got picked up slower. But I guess as we're putting out quality. We want to make sure that we have a standard of the sound that we're going for. And yes, we're making sure that these sounds in this package is very, very complete.
Mm,
It's everything is very, we're going for accuracy and we're going for intentional. We're going for making sure everything is where it's supposed to be. And this is, the correct way to get it done. But at the same time also making sure we're having a lot of fun and making sure we're communicating a human level of artistry to it. It's a funny balance, but I felt we really have a really great approach to it. Jacob Webb is the one who produced this song, and his approach to it was just, I felt it was remarkable and thorough, and I can just play, what the song asks for and add my own whatever I feel, and just making sure that it's very on par with our past singles and where we see ourselves moving forward.
I am so excited for you, not only for this single, but for everything else that is to come
Thank you so
from you.
much.
It's so cool to see that you've really found a groove and you've found a system and a packaging. At least for now, I'm not going to box you into this, but you've found a way in which to present your art that not only is artistically satisfying, not only is it achieving your goal of connecting to people and uplifting people. Like, I know when I listen to your music, for sure, I'm in a better mood afterwards, because how can you listen to such happy, positive music and come out the other end like not feeling happier than when you went in? I mean, I guess you're having a really bad day, but the point is it's uplifting, positive music. There's nothing negative about it. And so looking for that state shift, you're definitely achieving that. And I'm so, so stoked to see what comes next from you.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate that. And that's definitely the intention. Whatever emotions we're trying to convey, it's in everything from the metronome to the chords, and everything that we're doing is definitely there. And so I appreciate you acknowledging that.
So when you say that it's in the metronome, you mean the speed of the song that you're setting?
Yeah, the speed of song. I was jokingly saying that from everything that goes into
Yeah.
the recording process of the
Mm,
song, we try to make sure that it's contributing to how we want to make sure the audience or the listener is feeling.
mm.
Whether it's when it's hot, we want to make sure that we give you this energy, we give you something that feels like you want to just move. You have to move. You listen to it when you're listening to it, or when it goes back to pent up emotions, and you want to feel a little bit, in the middle. You want to feel a bit reflective. You want to feel a bit, um, like you feel warm, but you're been thinking about what contributed you to be feeling warm,
Mm.
or it's like all these different thoughts, um, and so everything is always intentional in making sure that from the ground up is all contributing to the same concept. And I feel like that's very important. And I feel when it's hot, it's just a clear example of that. We want you to feel happy. We want you to leave this place after hearing this feeling like, okay, you know what? Wow, this is great. We want you to turn it up when you're listening to it. Having music that people want to turn up is huge. And, that's definitely the goal.
Wow, fantastic. So before we transition into the second part of this podcast to talk about all the practicing and creativity stuff you do that helps you make this music, I do want to clarify one thing. Before I said we're not going to get into race, I should frame that into 21st century correct way of saying that and say ethnicity. Just want to correct myself on that, and we'll be good to move forward. Just
All
for
right.
all you amazing people who I'm sure left me a comment in the comment section about 5 minutes ago saying, how could you use that word to describe? Okay, ethnicity is
Right.
what I meant. Old habits die hard, as I'm sure everyone knows. Trying to do my best to use the correct lingo here. So uh, let's talk about some performance and creativity questions. So first up, how many hours do you like to sleep a night when you're not up in the middle of the night recording EPs? And how do you find that sleep contributes to your creativity and your ability to perform?
I'm probably the worst person to talk to about that because my sleeping schedule is all over the place. I think I've been getting better sleep now than I have in my whole life. But I feel like I've used my lack of ability to get more than 5 hours of sleep at a time since I was a little kid
Wow.
to, work and develop myself as a musician in a sense. Because at the time I'm up, I'm, sitting at the keyboard, sitting at listening to something or just um, kind of thinking about music in my head. And so I've really I'm almost nocturnal, but I generally only get 5 hours of sleep. And it's so funny. I've been thinking about why in the world has it been like this for most of my life. I grew up with asthma.
Oh,
And so a
wow.
lot of times, um, I would take medicines that are steroids to help make sure my lungs are moving right. And so those steroids also keep me up, make you a little jittery, especially when you're younger. And so I've developed habits over time to have a sleeping pattern like this. Now, what's funny also about asthma is that that's the reason why I started playing an instrument in the first place, was because I have an uncle who dealt with asthma for his whole life, and he took up swimming and other things to really control his lungs. And so it was a conversation between him and my mother. They suggested why not try and have him try an instrument so he can learn how to control his lungs better. And my mother came up to me and said, "Go in that band room and pick an instrument." And I had to stick with it. I wanted to play saxophone, but they only had trumpets available. I hated it, but I had to stick with it. And then about eighth grade, I really started to find a love for it. Honestly, I started in about going into the end of fifth grade, going into sixth grade, and I found a love with it then. But if it wasn't for my trials with asthma, I don't know if I would be as you know into playing a wind instrument like I am now.
So, do you nap during the day at all, or is it 5 hours and that's it?
Occasionally, I try to, every once in a while, try to get a nap in, but generally, recently speaking, especially since I've gotten a cat within the past year, I'm normally up around 6 o'clock. So I'll be up from 6, maybe until like 10, 11. I'll take a quick nap, maybe about an hour or two, and then I'll be up until ooh, what 1, 2, 3 a.m.
Wow. So sometimes you're actually splitting your sleep up into 3 hours and then 2 hours.
Right.
Wow. Fascinating.
And so, but I definitely imagine that having a healthy sleep schedule would definitely do the mind well creatively, and also, allow your body to reset, because playing trumpet, you're really working your lips. So you need time to heal. And so when you sleep, of course, your body allows to heal. But in my case, I just make sure I always pace myself and take necessary breaks and take time to allow myself to heal.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about practice in a minute, and I definitely want to get into that with you about the balance between how much actual sort of chop time you have versus how much time you're then spending on other activities like audiating, like singing, like on the keyboards. And like you said, sometimes you just think about music, which of course for any artist, having time to think is critical.
Yes.
So, have you ever tried mindfulness or meditation to help you with creativity or your art?
Not necessarily for creativity, but I've definitely tried meditation. Um, just kind of to relax and clear my mind, especially for a period of time when a few years ago I was trying to really rein in trying to sleep better. And so I took time to meditate, had a metronome going, or I would listen to some traditional Chinese music, which really helped me as well.
So, when you had the metronome going, was that for you to do like box breathing with? Like you'd breathe in for a certain number of clicks and then breathe out for a certain number of
Yes.
clicks and hold for a certain number of clicks? Okay.
Yes. Or just to focus on it for a while so I can work on clearing my head.
Mm.
Both. And I like setting my metronome. I know I hear that people like setting it faster, but I love 80. That's what I practice a lot of when I'm doing my daily routine. But that's just a great tempo for me to really, you know, I almost feel like that tempo was made for me, the
Mm.
beat per minute. And so I really organically, love that. And I have used that in the past to definitely dive into meditating and such.
That's fascinating. Can we take a moment to talk about 80? Because that's a really like I've always felt that the keys of A minor and D minor
Mhm.
were made for me. Like it's something that ever since I was a kid, like I remember I had one time someone I was playing was like, "Can we do something that's not in A minor, D minor?" This is when I'm like 12 years old because everything I wanted to play was in A minor. It just works. So can you
Right.
talk a little bit about your experience with the speed of 80, what
Right.
it means for you and how it feels.
80 for me is almost like the tempo where I can gather myself.
Huh.
Um, I feel like I said before, most of my practicing when I'm doing my routine and my just maintenance, I'm doing at 80. It's where I express my long tones, where I make sure my breathing is fluid. And so I feel that it's from that aspect of my life, it's just spilled into other facets. And so I definitely connect with that tempo.
Hmm.
I don't necessarily write a lot in that tempo,
Hmm.
but just having it there allows me to connect with myself. Does that
It's
make
like a home
sense?
base for you.
Yes. Yes.
Wow, that's fascinating. Have you ever tried exercise to help with creativity and performance or focus?
Um, Not necessarily for that purpose, no. Just only for a means of staying healthy.
Which, if you're not healthy, you're not going to be as creative and you're not going to be able to
Well,
perform at such a
right.
high level.
Yes. So I
So,
guess in
in
that
it,
space, I haven't been as mindful about it.
right. And how do people in your life support your ability to make music and be creative? Like, I imagine you have to be with, in terms of a partner, you have to be with someone who's going to be understanding of you getting an idea at 1 o'clock in the morning and jumping out of bed to go play the piano, right?
Absolutely. Yes. My girlfriend is very, very supportive and understanding of everything I'm doing in music and supports it. I'm also blessed that she's a deep sleeper and she can sleep through a lot. So when I'm in here playing my piano, I'm practicing my trumpet with my harmony mute in another room. It's not disturbing her, and that's great. But she's been so supportive and understands that if I have an idea or if I have something that I need to work on, I might be zoned in or zoned out from the what's going on immediately. But it's okay. And she understands she's an artist herself, that, being an artist, you're almost attacked with ideas. You don't know where they're coming from or when they're coming, but, and also the work ethic behind it. And so having somebody that understands that really allows me to be even more creative and allows me to really have a peace of mind of
Mm,
what I'm doing. And I don't have to worry about necessarily other things as far as like, divvying my time or um, you know just things that will be a little more out of my control. I'm in a space where I'm comfortable to be myself. I'm in a space where I can be creative. I'm in a space where if I have to travel to perform somewhere, it's okay. And having somebody that's just flexible and understanding is so important for me, and I'm so grateful that I found it, especially at this point in my life when I'm really starting to go for things now.
yeah, that's huge. So, what kind of art does your girlfriend do?
She's a writer.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
So, I think it's very interesting to have to be in a relationship with someone who either is an artist himself or has an artist in the family and sort of understands already coming into it what that dynamic is going to look like, because it's not the typical way of living being an artist. You need to, if you have an idea for something, everything needs to stop.
Hmm.
Everything needs to stop. And that one idea takes priority over eating, sleeping,
Oh yeah.
and anything. It becomes the priority, and whatever time it takes to get that idea down needs to happen. So, did you guys ever have to have any conversations around this, or was it just sort of you already understood, you were both artists, you were already understanding the same language, and it just sort of made sense?
Right. It definitely just sort of made sense. She knew, from the moment we met, how being an artist was essentially 90% of my personality
Mm,
and my life. And I heard, downtime she would just spend, writing. Every time she would think about something, be writing. Remember, uh, last year she was came over to my mother's house and we were having breakfast, and she just got out her notebook and just started writing. And so she has it the same way that I do, but just in her own respective ways. She's not necessarily, running out the shower wet to find a voice memo phone to leave a voice memo, but it's all there. And so when you have somebody of the same mindset, at least in some respects, it definitely helps. But also having somebody that just understands and wants to honor you and wants you to be you in that relationship and such is really, I think, even bigger than that, because it's not a matter of I may not understand everything that you're doing or why you tick the way you tick, but at the same time, because you're you and because I'm with you, I want to make sure that you can be you is really huge. And I feel like even if she wasn't an artist, having that respect and having that mindset really allows our relationship to flourish.
That's incredible. And sort of going off the music side of things, being in a relationship where you have that understanding
Mhm.
and that level of respect, that is just such a beautiful thing. And I'm so happy for you guys. Like
Thank you.
that is just really incredible. And that's absolutely the place to be.
Yes, thank you.
So when it comes time to practice, shifting gears, what time of day do you like to practice? And then what time of day do you end up practicing?
I'm well currently right now. I practice whenever I feel like it. A lot of times I'm practicing with my harmony mute at night. Mostly just doing long tones. That's been just my thing. Just taking that metronome at 80 and just doing long tones. And so I find myself practicing. Of course, I have my trumpet students that I work with, and so I get to reinforce a lot of my daily routine when I'm doing it with them as well, which is great. So I get to do it two, three, four times a day sometimes. And that's great. But ideally, I like to just get up after I feed my cat, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then I just come in the room and just sit down on my trumpet and just play some long tones and really just try to connect with it.
And when you're playing your long tones at 80, how long are you holding tones for generally? Like, are you doing, let's imagine we're in 4/4. How many measures are you holding? Or you could even just call it clicks and then we'll do the math. But how long
Mhm.
are you holding your tones for generally?
Generally speaking, with my students, I try to do it, just about two measures, sometimes three,
So
but
eight
mostly
clicks.
those eight clicks.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm as consistent from the beginning of my breath to the end of it. So I'm
Mm.
holding it for as long as I can, focusing on just the consistency of the sound and the airflow. And so that's really been my main focus. Um, and, making sure that I feel comfortable doing that and staying relaxed while doing that.
Yeah, and that's something that really comes across in your playing too, that consistency of sound and the
Mm.
consistency of quality for sure comes across
Uh,
in those melodies. Like when you're holding notes out, it is just even Steven from start to end without a doubt. Very interesting to see that practice pay dividends when it comes time to step into the studio.
all right, that's probably what I do most. These exercises, just making sure the airflow, which is the most important thing, is the gas in the car.
Mm.
It's really just there, and it's enough to support the sound. I'm not forcing it, and it's just an even flow. Like that's just the most important aspect of playing trumpet is the airflow.
So approximately how many hours a day do you practice trumpet specifically? And then how many days a week do you practice?
Hmm. I mean, honestly, it's more. I can more like give you an average.
Yeah, average is fine.
Um, about a week. I try to definitely make sure I have it about 14 hours a week.
Okay.
So
But
it averages about to 2 hours a day.
yeah,
Outside of giving lessons and such,
right.
just making sure like most of it, like at least the first hour, is just maintenance and making sure that I'm doing everything to maintain myself and you know, make sure all the screws are tightened and everything in my playing and my ability. Um, but and then any other things that I'm working on, whether it's transcriptions or certain technical things. But just generally about it. Um, and I feel like that's a good balance for me. I know some people practice a lot more, some people practice less, but I feel, for me and the way you know, trumpet works for me physically, that's a pretty nice balance.
And do you practice every day? So are you really doing about 2 hours a day, or do you have some days where you're not going to practice?
I have some days when I'm not going to practice, but then I'll make up for it the next day or so. Like I definitely am always aware of how my body feels as well,
Mm.
because sometimes I feel as if my body, isn't just right that day. you know, I may not necessarily take time to practice, but sometimes also my body may say, Alex, you need to work on your breathing a little bit because you're breathing a little heavy. Why don't you just take maybe just a chunk of time and just play some long tones just to get my breathing together? Because, dealing with asthma, that's all a real thing. And that's one of the things that helps me. And so it all depends, but averaging about 14 hours a week.
And then the days where you're not practicing, that's really just going to be it's going to depend on how you feel when you wake up in the morning.
Generally, or yes, how I feel when I wake up, or how I feel throughout the day. But generally speaking, yes.
What is the maximum length of time for an effective trumpet practice session for you? So you're going to make up, let's say you didn't play for 2 days. We're here on day 3. You're back
Right.
in the studio, trumpet in hand. How much time are you going to spend before the brain sort of goes, I've had enough?
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Because I don't know if it's necessarily quantifiable
Really?
by time
Okay.
necessarily, because I just want to make sure that my goal is always to make sure that whatever exercise or whatever um, thing I'm doing, I can do it to the best of my ability and it
Hmm.
feels natural and I'm not forcing myself. And so whatever I can do to get to that point where I complete the exercise and I feel, you know, confident and proud of what I've done in that particular exercise, I'll move on. Sometimes that could take longer than that, but most of the time it's just all about focusing on the result because that result can happen quick or it can happen slow, but it's all about just being honest with yourself during the process. And I feel, that allows me to alleviate some of the pressure. Initially when I was, younger, practicing trumpet, you have to meet these quotas of time and you have to do this and do that. And I wound up realizing that was just too much pressure on me.
Hmm.
So I started looking internally and saying, what do I need to
Mm.
make it work? And more, it's about making sure that for each exercise I'm doing, I'm just doing it to the best of my ability and hitting those key points that I need.
So when you were practicing a lot when you were younger,
Hmm.
what was the maximum amount of hours per day you would put in then?
Oof, 4 or 5.
4 or 5. And I think it's important for listeners to understand that this 4 or 5 hours, this is when you were really trying to accrue a lot of technique and a lot of
Yes,
ability and a lot of skills. And what you talked about earlier of that hour of maintenance is that you're making sure that all that time and all that investment in technique and understanding and skills stays with you, and that's what you're investing in that hour of time when you're practicing that maintenance.
absolutely. And during that time, I was between 2011 and 2015. First starting college, having my, first trumpet teacher that's really learning about more classical music and just some of the abilities and things that was needed in order to be successful. And just studying just a lot of different techniques and making sure that I had everything I needed for my next lessons and next jazz theory class and next things of that nature so I can be ready, and just also just taking time to really make sure that you're one with the trumpet, up until maybe last year, sometimes I would just practice, whenever and I would be in my room. I'd wake up and my trumpet would be right next to me. It's almost like taking less about the time and more about making the trumpet be an extension of yourself. Whatever instrument you play, making it an extension of yourself. You want to look at it like maybe it's your arm or something, where this is just a part of you. And so adopting that mentality, I felt was more important than anything.
Can you describe maybe one or two key points that you needed for classical trumpet that you did not need for jazz trumpet?
Hmm. I would say one, of course, would be the level of, you know, it's tough because everything that I learned in classical,
You
you
now
can
apply to
clearly see
jazz,
it
right?
in jazz.
Yeah.
You look at Maurice Andre, and then you look at Freddie Hubbard and Woody Shaw, and people who are real technicians on the instrument. And they're just, or, of course, Wynton Marsalis is the embodiment of that. You can really see that it's not necessarily about, technical things because you could be as technical as you need to be in jazz as well. And a lot of those melodies, and especially in bebop, are so technical that it's there. But I feel more it's more about just how you approach the pieces and
Hmm.
making sure you're contextually accurate, making sure that you're using the right nuances, making sure that you have the right inflections, making sure that your mentality is there, um, making sure of all of those things working together to be as accurate as possible.
So, for our listeners, to clarify that further, when you're talking about the right inflections, the right melismas, this would all be depending on the era or the time in which the piece that you're playing classically was written. There's going to be certain ways you're going to approach certain notes, certain groups of notes, and certain, golly gosh, I can't remember the name of the word. Uh, what's another, what would we call a turn or a mordant? We would call it a,
Embellishment.
there we go. Thank you.
There.
We found it.
Yes.
So you talked a little bit about how you divide your practice time into an hour of maintenance and then an hour of working on transcriptions, working on technique. How do you divide that maintenance hour? What are the key points you're trying to hit? So we already talked about long tones, and for our listeners, long tones can be performed on any instrument that makes sound. And essentially, all you're going to do is you're going to play a note for as long as it'll go. So you can even do long tones on a guitar. They're not going to last as long as on a trumpet, because on a trumpet you can continue the note with air, whereas on the guitar, once the string stops vibrating, the sound disappears unless you have some sort of effect on it. But the concept of practicing long tones, no matter what instrument you're on, is not something new. This has been around for a while. So you practice long tones. What else do you do for maintenance?
Oh boy, a lot of articulation to make sure I can be as clear as possible and intentional on how I start my notes.
Can you explain for people who may not be familiar with playing a wind instrument what an articulation would be and how you achieve that physically on the trumpet?
And articulation is just as can be parallel to how clearly we start or we enunciate when we speak. And so you with our wind instrument, we're using our tongue, our lips, and just the air itself to have varied ways of starting notes. And you have a wide range of intensities in which you would start a note, whether it be strong, whether it be soft, whether it be short or staccato or long legato, and making sure that you can perform those at your own will and as controlled as possible at varied speeds and also varied ranges of your instrument.
So, what you're talking about is having the technical freedom to then be able to make any artistic choice that you want to make once it comes time to play, when it comes to
Absolutely.
articulations.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I've been working on exercises. I have this one exercise that I do, and initially did it in every key chromatically, starting from a low concert B flat up to um, B flat above the staff on treble clef. But I simplified it to just go from B flat, starting on B flat, then starting on F in the middle of the staff, to starting on B flat on the staff to F above the staff, and then B flat above the staff. And so being able to just have that consistency from all ranges of your respective instrument, to be as accurate and consistent as possible is hugely important.
And so you're playing single notes here, or you're playing some type of scale or arpeggio? What's happening after you? So you're starting on a B flat 3, which is going to
Yeah,
be below the staff, and then you're ending on a B flat 5, which is above the
right.
staff. So what's happening after you play these B flats and these Fs?
Okay, so what it is, I'm starting an exercise, is the Goldman articulation study,
Okay.
the first half of it. And so I'm taking that and just playing it. It has a lot of single notes, but then it also goes through little passages about the range of a fifth.
Okay. So if you're starting on a B flat 5, you're going all the way up to an F6?
Oh no, so I'll be going up to, maybe if I start on a B flat, I'll go all the way up to the D above that, but then it'll also go down to the F below that.
So you're going to the D above high C.
Yes.
That is a high note, sir.
Right, it's high, yes, but and it's that's I'm still, of course, making sure I can work on that to make it as clear as possible, and making it with the least amount of tension in my body.
Mm.
But definitely that's the goal is to be able to play from the bottom of the horn all the way up to the top of my working range as consistently and as smooth as possible.
And again, this comes back to giving you the technical freedom to be able to play any note on your horn, therefore, be able to make any artistic choice within the structure of the instrument.
Yes.
All right, so we have long tones, articulations, range. What else do you do in your hour?
Flexibility studies.
Okay. What do those
And
look like?
so basically, slurring, which is connecting two notes without separation,
So another
without you,
articulation.
yes,
Yes.
without the articulation.
No,
And
but
so
couldn't we call slurring an articulation in and of itself?
absolutely,
Yeah.
yes, but without, yeah, so just without physically separating them itself, though.
Mhm.
And so making sure that I can move between notes at a varying range of intervals smoothly and without forcing it, without working
Mm.
too hard. Also at varying speeds, very important as well.
So when you're talking about this exercise, again, this is coming back, and I'll keep on saying it just to really drive the point home for our listeners. This is creating technical freedom so you can make whatever artistic choice that you want. This means that ostensibly, whenever you're playing a song, you can play any note on your instrument and you can smoothly transition between one note to the next. Now, is the reason why you're two follow-up questions actually. Number one, is the reason why you're putting this slurred legato practice by itself, is that to help you get a vocal quality?
Um, yes, definitely. The slurring is definitely a huge proponent to the vocal quality, but also it's just a huge proponent to making sure that you are tension free while playing the trumpet, because the trumpet could be such a physical instrument. Brass instruments in general are very, very physical. And a lot of times, especially with a trumpet or a French horn or such, you only have three valves to work with. And so you have to use your body to manipulate the sound so you can play in different registers, working with only a combination of your valves. And so being able to work on your slurs and having the flexibility to manipulate the registers that you're doing with your body really opens up your ability on their brass instrument.
Absolutely. And for people who don't understand what a register is, it's what we were speaking about before. You should go Google it. You could have a B flat 3 versus a B flat 4 versus a B flat 5. It's different octaves. It's a way musicians divide up um, how high or how low pitches are. So definitely go give that a Google, give that a read on Wikipedia. My second question for you on this is, as you're going through these maintenance exercises, are these all at 80? And if it is at 80, are you then, when you're speeding up exercises, dividing the pulse at 80 in different ways to get faster speeds?
All right. So I start at 80, but as home base. But
Mm.
I find with my long term tones, I tend to slow down the metronome. So currently at around 55, I'll slow things down to.
For how many
Eh,
measures? If we're in 4/4.
Well, this depends on the exercise because there are
Okay.
specified exercises, whether it's flow studies, and I'm just trying to go up a series of notes all within one breath and keep expanding it or such. I'm always just trying to make sure that a lot of time these exercises like that one would be in half notes.
Mm.
And so, making it slower stretches a half note and really just kind of really focuses on how efficiently you're using your breath. And with articulation studies, I make artists flexibility studies starting at 80 as well, but speeding it up to 120, 160 to make sure that I'm really being, I can do this at a multitude of tempos is
Mm.
key.
Are you doing anything else for your maintenance hour?
Um, Between those, that's primarily it.
Mm.
Just a combination and just different exercises, all covering those bases.
Mm.
And then, also, just making sure I'm being as accurate as possible, making sure that I can, as soon as I put the horn on my face, I can play whatever note I want to play and such. That's a key proponent too. But so it's just all that time. And of course, the time of the hour is not set in stone. It's whenever it's finished, and I feel confident and comfortable. And so, but that time is definitely spent divided between those.
That's fascinating. And then, like we mentioned before, after that, you'll do transcribing, which is listening to the great jazz artists who have come before and then trying to go note for note, copying their inflections, articulations, rhythmic feeling, and through that process, actually having them teach you essentially
Mm,
their knowledge and their musical way of doing things.
absolutely.
Yeah, super cool. Have you ever practiced so much that you've injured yourself?
Um, Not necessarily injured myself, but I remember back when I used to play lead in big band. Um, I used to have bad habits in which would lead to me cutting the inside of my lip or my tooth.
Wow.
And, then that would be a problem because until the callus would build and I would start to heal, it would kind of inhibit my endurance a lot,
Mm,
of course, because lips are a really big part of it. But not necessarily during practice, because I'm always aware of how much when I'm practicing, how much force and how much you know, tension I have in my body and, you know, making sure I'm relaxed. And so having the right mentality is like having the right form when you're working out. And you want to make sure that you're using your right form so you don't injure yourself and you're always um, doing things to in a healthy way and building those nice habits. And so when those habits are built, you don't have to be conscious of it as much and you can just continue to work well.
fantastic. So, do you think it's worth discussing the technique that you were performing wrong that led to this cut lip so people don't fall into the same trap? Or do you think it's
Absolutely.
best to just talk about the correct way to do that?
Absolutely. It's definitely important to talk about necessarily the wrong way or just the wrong way for you as
Mm.
well to get things done because you know,
So I'm sorry to stop. I'm sorry to cut in here, Alex, but did someone teach you to do it this way? And then just with the way your anatomy is set up in terms of your teeth and your lip, it didn't work out? Or is this a way that you sort of came to on your own that then didn't work?
right. A little bit of both. I feel as if I had to figure out a way for myself to, make things happen that were a bit extreme for what I needed, what my facility was at the time.
I see. So you were reaching past what you were technically easily able to accomplish on the trumpet.
Yes, yes. And so being able to make it work, you just had to do what you have to do. But in that process, I'm using too much force, using too much pressure, and really damaging myself in the long run.
Mm.
And so taking the time, you to really just control and work on refining myself so I can play and think of it more like whistling. Think of it more like just controlling the airflow as
Mm.
opposed to really mashing on my lips, really opened up the avenue where I can be more efficient.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that's going to be really important for any trumpet players out there listening to this that may be trying to get first chair or first trumpet in big band, and
Mm,
they're going to have to go play those really high lines
right.
really loudly. Take your time,
Mm,
practice. It's worth not hurting yourself, I think,
absolutely.
to play second chair for another 6 months or another year
Mhm.
um, before trying to move up. Get your technique right. Practice slow. Just like I think it's really important for students to understand the value of practicing slowly
Mhm.
with an introspective lens on your mind. And like you
Right.
were talking about, really listening to your body, really listening to the feedback that's coming through because practicing, it's a holistic experience,
Definitely. And slowly and softly,
slowly and
because
softly.
softly is huge too, you really, especially when you're playing those high parts, they're going to cut through. You always don't have to play as loudly as you think you do.
Mm.
And so if you take a step back and just work on being as efficient as you can, as softly as you can, that definitely will open up all the doors for you.
Minimum viable effort.
Right.
Hmm. Let's talk about some creativity.
Okay.
Do you take any steps to stay creative?
Um, well, I listen a lot to other things, always creativity is all around us. And why not listen to other people and listen to and find other sources of creativity outside of what you do personally to keep your spark going and maybe open your minds to new ideas. Looking at artwork, looking at clothes, listening to other musicians, and watching different things can all change your perspective. And I feel creativity and perspective kind of go hand in hand, at least for me.
Mm.
And so when I have an opportunity to reach into different bags of life, I can pull what I've amassed from the different bags and create something new.
Could we substitute perspective with mindset and experience?
Absolutely. I would say actually maybe not substitute, but add that along with,
Mm.
because experience definitely can influence your mindset, but it also can influence perspective because also your perspective can vary and you can have multiple perspectives on the same topic or the same approach. And so perspective and perception go hand in hand, and maybe even adopting other perspectives or other perceptions that may not necessarily be natural to you, but being able to have that is interesting. It's so funny. I always tell my students that being a musician is being an actor, in the sense that the music in front of you is the script, and it's up to you to play the role and bring that to life. And so that can be the same thing in creating, is you're telling a story and you're creating this character and you're creating this idea that you want to communicate. And it may not necessarily take how you would initially approach something from your own perception to make happen what you would like to happen. So take some time to just be honest with yourself and be honest with the content so you can create whatever is best for the music.
I want to let everyone sit with that for a second. That that was great. So, is that nighttime the time of day you feel the most creative? Like, do you find that there's a time of day where more ideas will come to you, or is it sort of like an all day type of a thing?
It's an all day, but night is definitely where it comes alive. Absolutely. There's something about the stillness of the night,
Mm,
and I love it. I wish I can exist kind of solely at night sometimes because I just love the darkness, the silence, the I can feel like there's so many less distractions.
mm.
And I feel like I hear better, I think better, I just am better at night. And so definitely dive into myself deeper and to the creativity at night.
Have you ever burned out and not felt creative?
Absolutely.
What led to that
Absolutely.
happening?
Sorry.
What led to that happening?
No, just most time, a couple different times, just making, a lot of times it's related to outside factors in life outside of create your creative pursuits as well.
I see.
And so sometimes when life can be a lot,
Yeah.
it takes away from your ability to be your true self.
But have you ever been in a situation where, let's say, you were gigging every night for 3 weeks in a row, plus you were teaching, plus you were practicing, plus you had to go to the studio, and it was just so much over such a period of time that you just needed to step away? Like, have you ever gotten to that point?
Not necessarily. I
Cool.
haven't. I've been fortunate though.
Yeah.
And there's been times where I've let other things in my life suffer when I've been in that state, but never the creativity or the art form because I just always knew that's something I didn't want to sacrifice.
Mm.
And so that would still take priority.
But you've never had a state where you burned out. So burned out is like overuse. You deplete certain hormones in your system because you're working so hard, and then it's just like you've never hit that point because you've been sort of smart about arranging when you're doing what and how much you're doing it for.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. But like I said, I've had times where I can't, work at my optimal level,
Mm.
or I feel like I don't have anything going for me, or I feel like the trumpet is a bit much. Absolutely. Absolutely. With the trumpet, you definitely feel it some days where you just can't make anything work for you.
Mm.
But just being conscious of that, be conscious of your body and saying it's okay to take a step back, but at the same time, still finding a ways that if this is what you want to do in life, finding time for it, finding a way to work around it is key.
On to performance. Have you ever experienced performance anxiety? And if so, how does it feel for you? What's your
Oh,
physical
yes.
experience?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. And mostly it happens right before I perform. So like not maybe like a day before or something like that, but right before, if I'm going to have anxiety about something, definitely right before. And what I just what it does is I just start to think about everything else too much, and I start to think too technical. But what always helps me is just listening, listening to the other musicians I'm working with, and trusting that I asked them, I'm working with them for a reason, and listening to their creative contributions, or listening to myself and remembering, you know, the real goal of what I'm doing here. And that kind of alleviates that anxiety where I can just be in the moment.
And how long does it take? Okay, so you're nervous before you start playing. Like first song, second song, 30 seconds in, how long does it take you to start to breathe, start to listen, start to interact, and then get back into that
Well,
music zone?
no, I mean during the first song, a lot
Mm.
of times in my sets, what I'll do is I'll even have I like to start off with the band playing before me, so I
Yeah,
could just listen to them and really get, you know,
the vibe.
everything, the vibe going, and so by the time
Yeah.
I'm ready to play, and after that first note, I'm in it because it's the camaraderie that kinda helps me move forward.
Wow. I saw Rochelle Farrell do a similar thing too. She had the band play and then she came on. She's an incredible vocalist for our
Yes.
listeners. You should definitely check out Rochelle Farrell. She is, I mean, she's the vocalist from Mars. She's on another level. Um,
Yes, definitely amazing.
yeah, for sure. Cool. Alex, those are all my questions for you. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Wow. Well, first of all, I just wanna thank you so much for creating a platform and having such amazing questions and talking points. I feel it's really unique and needed, and so thank you for creating this platform. It's great. I would love to just, I just wanted to make sure that I'm really talking about being honest with yourself as a musician and following your heart, but at the same time being accurate with what you're doing. My favorite quote is I have it in my email. Roy Hargrove said, "Take care of the music, and it'll take care of you." And what that means to me is no matter what pursuit you're on, no matter what you're drawing from or what you're trying to do, not just in music but in life, you honor what came before you, and you're doing things to make sure that what's happening in the moment honors what's happening in the moment, the music or whatever you're doing in life. Um, we all study so much, and we all have our influences, and we all take time to really refine ourselves. But we have to remember that all of that ability that we're amassing and all of that knowledge that we're growing and language that we're collecting is all to serve a purpose of allowing us to be as honest with the music as possible and our ability to connect with what's happening musically. And so I want to make sure that if anybody's listening, to know that you're not a guitar player first, you're not a trumpet player first, you're not a pianist first, you're a musician first, and beyond that you're a human first.
Mm,
And all those and as you go deeper, yes, there are technical things that are specified specific to your instrument or your voice, um, or your chosen medium of expression, but it's all to serve the purpose of you being a musician or an artist. And so before you get so hung up on pleasing just a certain crowd, I want to do this because, you know, the guitarist players, my guitar buddies are going to love this. That's definitely a part of it. But the bigger picture is serving the song, serving the music, serving the creative outlet. And so remember that music is a form of communication and it's an art form. What are you trying to communicate? And if you want to reach as many people as possible, if you want to just honor what you're doing, you just be mindful. I'm trying to be more mindful every day. And I just implore everybody listening to do the same.
and the practical step for doing that would be to put the instrument down and to work on yourself as a musician. This is going back to
Absolutely.
this is what we talked about at the very beginning, how Alex is singing his melodies. This is going back to what we talked about at the beginning of the soul, the mind, the heart, and the learning all coming together regardless of what instrument you play. Put the instrument down, work on yourself as a musician, then
Mhm.
pick it up and be the specialist, and the specialty would be the particular instrument that you're playing.
Absolutely. And that mindset can allow you to listen to, you know, somebody who is very, very technically proficient. You could tell, say, like for instance, Maurice Andre, and truly appreciate that. But then also listen to somebody like Drake and appreciate them too, from having went to school for music and it's just following their heart and it's building. technical things, abilities in their own genre, just because they may not have the same approach as you or the same background.
Mm,
If you just listen to it in a sense of serving the music
mm.
and taking a step back from what you can do technically and just what does the music need, I find that it allows you to have a very open mindset to where you can appreciate more things in life. Some people don't want that, of course, and it's unfortunate they do. They only want, I studied this, and so I only want to hear things from people who have studied this too. I come from this mindset, and so I'll judge everything from this one mindset of, people that, you know, in Germany that studied, that created music hundreds of years ago or whatever. But if you allow yourself to go beyond that and look at the world for what it is, and also allow yourself to just be honest with what's happening musically, no matter what the setting, not only will you enjoy more, but you'll also be able to approach more. And your listeners will truly appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here. Mr. Alex Parchment, you can find him on social media at Mr. Parchment. That's MrParchment. His new single, When It's Hot, is out now. Go grab it while it's still hot. Ladies and gentlemen, Alex Parchment.
Thank you so much for having me.